welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessikah, and our guest today is... That's your cue.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Hi, I'm Lauren Owen.
And Lauren, we're going to be talking to you today about the book Small Angels, which is like a really difficult book to describe. It's a novel of interconnected stories that feel almost like campfire tales with like a thread running through them. It's the story of, Small Angels is not the actual name of the church, right? That gives the name to the book. What is it in full?
It's St. Michael and All Angels. So in the kind of the surrounding neighborhood, they sort of portmanteau that into Small Angels.
Which would be adorable if there wasn't like so much history to Small Angels. And it's the story of Chloe and Sam who lives in the town where Small Angels is and knows the lore, and Chloe who's like a newcomer. And it starts off at the Albatross is the name of
Yes.
So I mean, you know, I've read a few poems by a few romantics, and I was like, ooh, that's a bit ominous, because I don't think an albatross is supposed to be a good omen.
Yes. Yeah, it's a bit of a sort of an Ancient Mariner tribute there. I think sort of the idea of people showing up and telling stories, even if maybe you don't want them to, is kind of a theme in the definitely in the first chapter. So it felt appropriate there.
And it's this also the story. So is it the Gone sisters? How do you pronounce it?
Yes, I would say it Gone.
Okay.
So that's how it is in my head anyway.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I was like, is it Gone? Is it? But there were four. So there's a family that had sort of like kept the ghosts of the Mockbeggar Forest at bay, protecting the town, and it sort of ended with these four sisters, one of which, Lucia, is still around, and Sam's sister comes back for the wedding, and she herself has a history with the sisters and with the town, and it's just like all of these, just like I said, like these weird, haunting, interconnected stories which begin to tell a bigger picture. So like where did this story begin, and where did the whole world of Small Angels begin?
I think it probably began, I would say, with the woods. They're kind of a big presence in the book. Mockbeggar Wood, it's this very massive, mysterious woodland place where you can sort of wander and get lost, or you don't know quite what you're going to encounter when you sort of step into the trees. And that was definitely, I think woods have always had quite a big hold on my imagination. I used to love books, well, still do, books with sort of mysterious or magical woodlands in them. I think maybe one of the first was actually The Wind in the Willows, which isn't a magical wood, but it's a wonderful atmospheric chapter in there where Mole sort of strays into the woods. He's looking for the badger's house, and night comes, and he sort of, there's this kind of mood of panic and this sort of wonderful, sinister, growing sense that he really shouldn't be in this woodland, and he sort of sees a rabbit racing past him, saying sort of, get out now. And it's just so, it's wonderfully done. I used to love the chapter as a child. My copy of the book actually has wonderful illustrations, and the trees sort of have unfriendly faces. They're kind of formed out of the shapes in the bark. So I think probably the idea of making a sort of a magical wood, a sort of intriguing and sinister place of my own. That was probably what started me off with thinking about small angels.
Are you a big ghost story person?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I sort of have quite a vivid memory of, I think, probably hearing my first ghost story sort of told as a ghost story when I was a kid, and it made quite an impression. Just the setup and the kind of the sort of it's an interesting feeling because you're sort of very safe and cozy. You're in this nice circle of listeners all sharing this tale, and you know that you're safe, and whatever the sort of whatever the spooky thing is happening, it's happening to somebody else, and yet there's this sense of, oh, are we as safe as all that? So it's kind of a lovely balance between safety and danger. So I think ghost stories I've always been interested in. I spent a lot of my childhood in York, which is a very old city. There's a lot of I think probably about 10 different cities in the UK will say, oh, we're the most haunted city in the country, but I think York has got a good claim. It's got some very interesting ghosts and sort of the rich history that entails. So yeah, ghosts have always been a fascination of mine, I think.
I don't really want to like talk too much about the specific ghosts and small angels because like, you know, I said it's like you're entering the woods and you're kind of going down this winding road, and you have to find them with, you know, as the reader, or with Chloe, if you will. But there's also like a fairy tale sense to this whole story, where with Chloe and her wedding, and how she really wants to have it at this charming little church. And I suppose everybody's just like, okay, but really in the back of their mind, they're just not. They're like, oh, that's not really a good idea. And there's this whole, I felt like this whole feeling of, you know, the princess who is in an enchanted place and is told, you know, you'll be safe as long as you don't do this, or even what is it, like Persephone in the underworld, don't eat anything.
Yes, yeah.
Or what is it east of the sun, west of the moon, west of the sun, east? Now I'm trying to remember, where like there's the woman with the invisible guards, the invisible servants, and it's like, there are things you don't do and things you do, and I felt like there was a little bit of that with Chloe. Like, she came into this though not really knowing the rules. Kate comes back, and Kate definitely knows the rules, and Lucia definitely knows the rules as well. Were there fairy tales that inspired you when you were thinking of small angels?
I think that absolutely, and actually sort of that sort of brings out something that I think, I'm not sure I quite spotted, kind of a element underlying things, which is thank you for pointing that out, because I love that. I love to think sort of see that element, and now that you've said that, I can kind of see it emerging more clearly. I think I used to read quite a lot of fairy tales as a kid, and I think I used to find the idea of the myth or the fairy tale of something being planted and then growing quite intriguing. Sort of the idea that if you have maybe a sort of a murdered character and they are buried, perhaps a tree will grow, and the tree will be made into an instrument, and the instrument will sing about what happened. That kind of trope, I think, was definitely there, sort of underlying
Right.
a lot of this. So yeah, I think it's definitely a sort of maybe more of the more kind of some of the grimmer fairy tales in some aspects, but yeah, I think that's definitely there.
Yeah, because sometimes you can't really tell which of those fairy tales are not like horror stories. I
Mm,
mean, even though sometimes there's a happily ever after, but not always. Sometimes
yes.
there's a weirdly ever after, even, or strangely ever after. Um, there's, even in some ghost stories, a lot of times there's rules. It's like you have somebody who's told, listen, you'll be fine as long as you do this and you do this and you don't do this, and like there's no story if the person's just like, cool,
Yeah.
we're good. And Chloe not being from this place
Mm,
and not understanding and not growing up with this lore, is inherently curious, just like Persephone, just like the princesses. And it's really interesting, but at the same time there's also the story of Kate and Lucia's relationship and friendship and background, which is almost like a different kind of fairy tale and a different kind of bond, and that also makes for this beautiful tapestry.
I like to think of, or probably Kate does as well to an extent, but I sort of see their connection as being sort of like the idea of the imprisoned princesses, and they sort of have to be set free. And I think that's probably lurking in Kate's way of thinking about the sisters, and to an extent that's probably a bit of a dangerous way to think about it, because she gets sort of caught up in something she doesn't entirely understand, and puts herself in danger because of that. But I think that's definitely in her thinking. I suppose in a strange way she's quite a chivalrous person, Kate. So yeah, that's definitely an element to that relationship.
Did you weave in any traditional lore that people would be maybe not familiar with when you were writing Small Angels?
I had a lot of fun researching ghosts, and also kind of other sort of superstitions and fairy tales set around Suffolk. The book's kind of loosely set in Suffolk. It's not a particular place as such, but it's there very faintly. So I kind of did a bit of reading up on various legends and myths from around the area, and I really liked the idea. I think there were these green children at one point discovered in Suffolk.
I love this story. I love it because I think it's actually a story that, yes, I think it's actually a story that exists in a few different places, but please continue, because I know exactly what you're going to talk about.
The idea of these children who I think they just sort of show up, and I think they claim to have come from a different world or a different country, and where everybody's green. And I think if I read the version I read of the story, the boy doesn't make it, but the girl actually sort of grows up and marries somebody, and it's this very odd sort of, they just appear and they're green. But yeah, I found that was just a lovely sort of, it was something I wanted to bring into the woods, the idea of that there might be sort of these diverse sort of mystical elements that aren't quite explained, or you don't get 100% of an explanation, because they just are what they are. I think there was another Suffolk legend which is, I think, quite famous, but there was a attack on a church. It was a demon dog was said to have attacked this church, and I think several people died in this legend. And you can still see the claw marks that the dog left on the church door. So that definitely I sort of stirred that into Small Angels, and yeah, that was a nice one to bring in. I think quite a lot of the ghost stories that I read sort of made their way into the book just kind of even if it's sort of a pinch or a sort of a tiny element. I think the one book I read, which I forget the name, but it was very much talking about exorcisms. It was written in the 19th century, and it sort of was kind of telling about how various ghosts have been exorcised. And I was intrigued because there's quite a practical or almost a prosaic element to a lot of these. Like you can read Bible, you read the Bible to the ghost. You assemble as many clergymen as you can get your hands on, and you light the candles. You read the Bible, and the ghost can be forced into a bottle or some sort of small container, and you can then throw that into the sea, and that's how it's done. There was one account I read that the ghost refused to go into the bottle for some time because there was somebody, I think, in the vicinity, like sort of whilst the exorcism was going on, some guy was sitting there eating bread and cheese. So it kind of, I was intrigued by this sort of almost the physical. There's a physical sort of almost an earthy element to some of these sort of old exorcism accounts. And a few legends I came across seem to talk about the idea of a ghost returning. So you can banish a ghost for 100 years or 900 years, but eventually it may find its way out again. There's one ghost I think was imprisoned in a bottle and thrown into a river, and vines start coming up the side of the bridge, and you have to keep sort of tearing the vines off, because the minute the vines reach the top again, the ghost is at liberty. So I think I was really intrigued by the idea of a sort of an exorcism with a time limit attached. So yeah, I had a lot of fun kind of reading up on various stories to kind of put small angels together.
Well, it was a really good book. It's very juicy.
You.
It's very freaky and haunting and sweet. And it really feels like an old story, and I loved it. So before we sign off, just questions. So are you a believer in ghosts?
Oh, do you know, I like to think that there might, I feel like I'm the kind of person who would be oblivious to ghosts, like the sort of the annoying person in the film who like refuses to believe anything until it's too late. I feel like I'm a bit kind of in my own head thinking about various things, and I just like blithely walk past any kind of spiritual manifestation. But I do like to think that why not? There have definitely been places where I felt like there's an atmosphere here, and I think the older I get, the more I feel that I am kind of I guess I am, and all people are kind of haunted by the people that we've known. And I think I personally feel haunted by my family, sort of not because they've passed on, but just because I know what they would say in certain situations, and I have I have ideas from them. I have catchphrases that have sort of found their way into my day-to-day use, just because we're sort of, I guess, kind of inhabited by each other to an extent, and maybe our personalities are a bit more permeable than we would like. But yeah, I feel like if I wouldn't rule ghosts out, definitely.
I consider myself an open-minded skeptic.
I think that's the
right?
the healthiest way to be,
I'm not I'm pretty sure, like I'm pretty, I think, level-headed, and I'm not like I don't buy into a lot of ghost stories, even though I love them, but I'm also open-minded. Sometimes things happen and they're a little weird, and I'm just like, I mean, probably not, but maybe.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a science that we haven't grasped yet. I mean,
Right.
if there are alternate universes and time is relative and think everything's happening at some point in time all at once, that's at least that's my understanding, then why not have these slippages between different times. And so yeah.
Thank you so much. This was fun. Please come back when you write another book. Are you writing another book?
Absolutely. Yes, we're working on one at the moment. So yes, but thank you so much for having me on. It's been really nice to talk about Small Angels. So thank you.
It has. Okay, so this is Jessikah with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was
Lauren Owen.
You got it.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.